Okay, I have something very special for you guys today. Today we are going to do a tier list of everything that I've reviewed. It looks like I had 80 books in the queue. Maybe I missed one or two, but I think for the most part, these are all of the books that I've reviewed since I've done the first part of this. I'll link the first part. This tier list is going to be a little different. I don't remember exactly the criteria I used for the last one, but this one I'm going to do off of like enjoyment, how much I want to reread it, how much I suggest it. And I'm kind of gonna go through these different criteria as I'm doing this, so it'll become more clear, but don't really worry about the strictness of it. This is more so my enjoyment. And, I'm going to probably rank some great books, not very high, and I'm going to rank some books that aren't that great very high, just off my personal enjoyment. This is my own personal list. Let me know what you think about it. And yeah, we'll get into it. So the first thing we have is Fragments. Fragments is a work by Heraclitus, and I'm just gonna put it S tier because it's so short but so profound. A lot of the things that I was reading in it, I really found a great affinity for. The greatest idea from this book is you never step in the same river twice, basically illustrating the point that everything is in flux, everything is changing, and it's how we deal with these changes that really determines our life, essentially. The next thing is The Road. The Road is by Cormac McCarthy. It's a story about a boy and a father going south in a post-apocalyptic world. It really hits the theme of, is there a good person in such a desperate world? And it's a tremendous tale. I think anything by Cormac McCarthy is extremely well done. Let me put this in A tier because I don't know if it's S tier. It's definitely a really, really good story, but it's I don't know. I want to reserve the S tier for works that are like transformational, that are must read for absolutely everybody. So that's going to be an A tier. Slaughterhouse-Five, we're going to call it a B. It's an interesting work. It's about the Dresden bombings and how it affected a soldier that was there. Essentially, it's really not about Dresden itself, but it's about how somebody dealt with their time in Dresden and all of the build up to it. And it's a really good story. It will talk about something that a lot of people are not familiar with and the horrors that were the Dresden bombings, but I don't necessarily think it's something that I would recommend to everybody. It's a very good book, but it's not best tier. What is this? This looks like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This is clear S tier. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is one of the best books I've ever read. And this is something that Freud said. It's essentially, he said that all of the greatest artists understood the dualistic nature of man, the conscious and the unconscious, the forces that we let into the public and the forces that we let fall behind and slip behind the mask and kind of fester and turn into something wicked. And essentially, this is what Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is talking about. It's the real twist of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is that there's not two people. It's Dr. Jekyll's escape. It's his wickedness coming out. It's not that the drug allows him to be evil. It's that it allows him to be evil without consequences. And it's really just his darker side. And it is a very interesting philosophical concept, and it really talks about, are we ever good people, or are we really just trying to be good people? There's a darkness inside of all of us that we need to come to terms with. And I wonder what Jung would say about this. I don't think he ever commented on the work, but it's definitely something I would be interested to hear his take on. The next thing we have is Siddhartha. Again, great book. I think it's very interesting. I think it's very compelling. Shorter work. It's one of those short philosophical spiritual fiction that I think is a nice fun read, is something that you'll go through and you'll enjoy it, but it's not something that's going to stick with me. It's not something that taught me anything. It's not really anything that I was like, wow, it transformed the way I thought. It's definitely a great book. It's definitely something that I would suggest to read. But again, nothing too special, nothing transformational. It's not Khalil Gibran. It's not Mikhail Naimi. It's a good work. It really is. But it's not up there on the upper echelon. A Clash of Kings. Um, Again, it's George R. R. Martin. It's a Game of Thrones series. It's You know what you're gonna get. It's a good story, good political strife, interesting, tidbits of magic. The world building is tremendous, but it's just a story. It's not like Tolkien, it's not like Dune, it doesn't do anything aside from being a good story, and that's really where George R. R. Martin falls short. I love his writing. I think he's a great writer. I just don't think he offers a worldview, offers a philosophy that is compelling, and yeah, that's what I gotta say about this. Dune Messiah. Dune Messiah is going to be a B because the entire book was a lead up to the ending, and the ending is tremendous. The ending has some great philosophical interpretations. It's about the death of a hero and the creation of a Messiah. I think it's a really, really interesting ending, but the buildup is so boring. I hate to say it, like I really didn't enjoy the buildup, and I kept reading it, and I'm like, where is this going? I was really happy where it went. I think the second Dune ended better than the first Dune, but yeah, not really enjoyable the whole way through, but I definitely see what Frank Herbert was doing. The first Game of Thrones, I'm gonna put it B tier again. Again, I think these books are fairly consistent. I think they are enjoyable. There's a lot of interesting parts. There's a lot of build up. There's a lot of intrigue. But again, there's not much philosophy. There's not much stuff to think about. Maybe there's some tidbits that you're, questioning. What does this mean? What could this be? What's happening? But it's not that stimulating philosophically or metaphysically or any sort of deeper implications on society, and it doesn't really offer a cohesive worldview. It's kind of a just postmodernist work, and I feel like it's been done better in other things, but again, overall good book. Not something that I would say don't read, but it's not something that I would run out to read instantly. Dune, S tier. Dune is one of the best books ever written. It really is. It has everything for everybody. It has a great story. It's a swashbuckling space adventure. It has political strife, political intrigue. It has secret societies. It has all sorts of esoteric themes and interesting ideas, and it's definitely something that you should read at some point in your life because it has something for everybody. I would recommend reading at least the first Dune. I think I don't know if you necessarily have to finish Dune, the series. I think a lot of it is contained in this one story, and I think a lot of what Frank Herbert was trying to say is contained in this one story. But, you know, good work. The Return of the King. We are gonna put this S tier. The Return of the King is the best book by Tolkien in the Lord of the Rings series. I think just the way he wraps it up, I think the implications of the story are so profound. I mean, this is something that was lost in the movies, but the what is it, the scourging or the scouring of the Shire? I can't remember exactly what it's called. But the chapter where Frodo goes back to the Shire and is faced with Saruman and is given every you know all authority to basically exact his revenge on Saruman. He says, "No, I'm not going to give you the revenge. I'm going to let you roam this world with no power, with no influence, and you have to, face what you've done. I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of, sentencing you to death or doing this or doing that. I'm just going to allow you to allow yourself to wither away to nothing." And to me, it was really, one of the strongest endings that I've ever seen because Frodo was a man that was faced with terrible, terrible, terrible temptation, and he never gave in to that temptation. Even after he went on this tremendous journey and was wrong, he had the opportunity to get his revenge, and he said, "No, I've seen what temptation, I've seen what revenge does, and I'm not going to fall victim to it." And it's a tremendous ending. It has great implications onto every facet of life, and I think it really sucks that it was left out of the movie. I understand why, but I think it kind of takes away from Tolkien's narrative and the philosophical implications of it. This is The Two Towers. I'm gonna put it at A tier just for the Siege of Helm's Deep. Great, 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 great writing. I think it's better than the movie. I think if you've watched any of the Lord of the Rings movies, you should definitely read the books because it's just so superior. It really is. The detail, the world building, the mythos. I think the movies did the best I've ever seen of interpreting the books, but there's still so much out of it, and definitely something you should read. Again, Fellowship of the Ring, gonna put it A tier. I think the books as a whole are extremely strong. There's not a single wasted space. The first one, interestingly enough, includes a character named Tom Bombadil, and that section is both infuriating and hilarious. Essentially, Tom Bombadil is just this guy that lives out in the woods that is unaffected by everything, and you know, he puts on the ring and nothing happens. And really, it's so funny because it's Tolkien's attempt to write somebody that is oblivious to the world around them, but just enjoys it all the same. And it's to show that even in a world of such good and evil, there are people that kind of just do their own thing. And it's really funny. Anthem, we're gonna put A tier. I think Anthem is one of Ayn Rand's strongest works that I've read. There's certain things I agree with her on, there's certain things I disagree with her on, but I think Anthem is something that everyone can enjoy. Essentially, it's a society that was kind of the individual was destroyed, and when the individual was destroyed, it was replaced with the collective. So everything is done in regards to the collective. Everything was done in regards to, well, we must progress this way. So the society's progressed to the point where it doesn't even know the word I, and it's really about a individual discovering his individuality and how that is really good for the progress of man. It has a very it's very analogous to Plato's cave allegory. It's very analogous to the Prometheus myth. I think the original title was something about Prometheus. I can't remember because Frankenstein had a a Prometheus title as well. So I don't want to misquote it, but yeah, if you know the Prometheus myth, if you know the cave allegory, it's this story done into a, you know, dystopian novel. Love it. Great work. Definitely read Ayn Rand. She's very interesting. Manufacturing consent. Uh, I want to go A tier. Yeah, I'll go A tier. The thing about manufacturing consent is it kind of opens your eyes to the abuses of the media and how the media can kind of spin narratives based off of who's funding them. A big focus of the book is that all of these media conglomerates went from like 60 in the 90s to six, and now all of these news agencies are kind of controlled by the same people who have the same interests, and they're large corporations that have large corporate interests. So, I mean, you could see during 2019, 2020, we'll say that Big Farm was funding a lot of these people, so they couldn't say anything bad about them. They couldn't talk about the conflicts of interest. They couldn't, you know what I mean? It's just when you're in bed with powerful people and you're a powerful entity yourself, you can't take risks. You can't talk about the truth. So, are you going to be honest about your friends? Are you going to tell the whole truth? Or are you going to spin it and play these legalistic games? And essentially, that's what it's talking about. It also goes into the various coverages of U.S. foreign policy, of, you know, age, different different relationships with different countries and how that changed the narrative on how it was talked about and how the US kind of covered up certain atrocities because we were in bed with these governments. And, I think it's a good book, but I think Chomsky himself kind of misses the point of freedom of speech and freedom of press. And some of the things he said recently are kind of ridiculous because he wrote manufacturing consent and now he's trying to manufacture consent. It's just it's frustrating to see somebody that wrote such a good book become something that is juxtaposed to what he was talking about. But anyway, it's more of a personal thing. That's why I don't put this in S tier. I want to lower it, but yeah, Blood Meridian S tier. Blood Meridian is another work by Cormac McCarthy. I think it's his best work. It's my favorite work. It reminds me of the westerns that I used to watch as a kid and even into adulthood. And essentially, it's about the West. It's about the manifest destiny. It's about the victor's history and what is justice. And, is justice all that you can enact by force? And essentially, it's a bleak look on American values and the American ideal. And it's just so well done. There's a soul in this book that is unmatched in anything else that I've read, and I really suggest you read it. Sand and Foam. Sand and Foam is like my favorite book right now. It's Khalil Gibran's I think his best work. Essentially, it's a grouping of aphoristic phrases with um, the scope of the entire world to the relationship between friends. It talks about everything that you could ever want to know, and it's the classic Gibran wisdom through a poetic reverse. Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. This is a short collection of poems by William Blake. William Blake's one of my favorite poets. But essentially, it's a mix of different short poems that kind of relate but don't at the same time. There's parts of this book that are extremely moving. There's parts that are, but I feel like that's the way it is with every poem. Certain poems speak to you, certain don't. But overall, it's a great work. Definitely recommend reading it. It's around 40 pages. You could probably find it online for very cheap and some of the best poetry you'll ever read. The Artist Way. I'm gonna go. We'll go C tier. It's a good book. It offers a lot in terms of creativity, but it's not something that like changed the game for me creatively. I think its two main suggestions are when you wake up, write for 10 minutes, and then throughout the week take yourself on artist dates. So like do something that you want to do. So like if you want to go get ice cream with yourself. And it's basically just like exploring your own identity, exploring yourself. I think it would help people. I think it's interesting, but I would rather read Emerson. I would rather read Nietzsche. I'd rather read somebody like that, or even Neville Goddard. I think those people have more interesting ideas when it comes to creativity, but it's definitely an interesting place to start, and I think, yeah, could help a lot of people. Fahrenheit 451. We're gonna go A tier. Um, I think this has the best story of any dystopian novel. And I think it has very interesting implications on society. Essentially, Fahrenheit 451 is about firefighters that burn books instead of put out fires. And they burn books because they want to get rid of dissent. They want everyone to agree because through disagreement is a lot of arguments and a lot of bad stuff. And basically, the justification is if we homogenize everybody, then everybody's going to get along. And I think that has very scary implications, but it is a really good book. It's definitely something worth reading, and it's not as dense as 1984 Brave New World. Autobiography of a Yogi. I'm gonna say B tier because I like the book, but it's kind of convoluted in certain ways. It's kind of all over the place. It talks about interesting stories and all sorts of stuff, and it's good. It really is. It's something that I suggest reading, but it's not like must read. It's not something that I would recommend to everybody. I think there's parts of it that people aren't going to like, and it's like 700 pages, so I don't know if it's even something that people are interested. But if you're into kind of new age spiritual stuff, you're going to love it. The Master Key System, we're gonna go B tier. Uh, talks a lot about visualization, talks a lot about law of assumption, law of attraction stuff. Um, I only put it B tier because I think Neville Goddard is the end all be all when it comes to these sorts of ideas. I think if you just read Neville Goddard, you don't need to read these other things. Definitely has some unique things to offer, gives you exercises, how to improve your imagination, how to improve your ability to picture, and I think that's an essential skill. I just think that Neville Goddard does it in better ways. The Gay Science, S tier, one of my favorite works of philosophy. Um, Tremendous. All of Nietzsche's big ideas are in this. The will to power is kind of in it. It's not coined yet, but it's in there. The eternal recurrence, the Übermensch, subjective nature of reality, all sorts of ideas that Nietzsche's famous for are in here. And I think The Gay Science is the best work by Nietzsche to me because it's Nietzsche at his most inspirational. He's not yet fed up with life. He's not yet pessimistic, and it seems like it's him at his most happy and most positive, and it really bleeds through. I think some of his later works, you can see the kind of lack of success, the lack of appreciation from the intellectual community as a whole, and I think it kind of ate away at him to a certain extent. But yeah, great work. Really recommend it. The Virtue of Selfishness. We're gonna go with B. There's parts of this I agreed with, there's parts of this I didn't agree with. Essentially, what it comes down to is Ayn Rand argues that selfishness is a good thing. Selfishness is something that pushes society forward because if you're being all you can be, then you can be all you can be for others. When we think of selfishness, we often think of putting ourselves above other. others. But if you really break it down, putting yourself above others is not a selfish decision, it's an idiotic decision because if you put yourself above others and hurt other people at all times, then you're going to develop enemies. So in fact, it's not selfishness, it's just idiocracy. But the Bhagavad Gita, I'm gonna say S tier. I think it has a lot of interesting things. It's great poetically and definitely something well worth reading. Um, really don't have much more to say about it, but yeah, Tears and Laughter. Um, we're gonna go A tier. I'm gonna try to keep S tier as low as possible, and I don't want to put everything by a certain author in S tier. Tears and Laughter it's like a collection of short stories and short poems, and has some things that are gonna make you cry, have some things that are gonna make you smile, and overall masterfully done. Definitely recommend it if you've never read Gibran. It's a great place to start. Yeah, tremendous work. Alchemy, we're gonna go B tier. We're just gonna go B tier because I think S tier and A tier are reserved for books that are like books you have to come back to, books that tell you something about the world that you couldn't get in anything else. Alchemy is one of those business books that I think you should read. It talks about how people try to overanalyze things, people try to over conceptualize things, and you have to have this nice chart that explains everything, but there's certain things that just can't be explained. There's certain things that just work. Um, the book is basically about marketing and clever marketing, and when clever marketing is done right, how it can be transformational. I think it's a book that if you're at all interested in business, if you're at all interested in a different way of business, because I feel like when you're in a corporate setting, everything's about, oh, you have to have metrics, you have to have numbers, but like if you have basic logic, I think you can do more than just numbers, but that's just me. Um, yeah, definitely a good book. Definitely has a lot to say. The Will to Power, we're gonna go B tier. The Will to Power in certain moments is S tier, but in other moments it's C tier. Um, I think it's just inconsistent because The Will to Power really is Nietzsche's journal. It's unpolished, it's raw, and in some regards it's really good, but in other regards it kind of yeah, it's not that great. The Will to Power is also probably Nietzsche's most controversial work because his sister was dating or was married to an anti-Semite and he gave it to the wrong people, so it kind of grouped him with the wrong sort of people. And it's really ironic that like, how do I say this? The 1940s German government enjoyed this because it literally talked about hating all systems of control and all systems of power and all systems that limited you. And it's really ironic because these clowns read this work and said it supports our ideology. It does not. It doesn't support any ideology. Nietzsche's entire philosophy is against ideology. And it's so funny how so many people misread it. And the comments online about this book, like the reviews, are some of the most low IQ takes I've ever seen. Read it for yourself. It has really good moments. It has really bad moments. It's not the same wit, it's not the same fire, it's not the same consistency of a normal Nietzsche work. And that's just why it's B tier. But yeah, Alan Watts, The Way of Zen. We're gonna go B tier. I think this is Alan Watts' best book. Alan Watts isn't necessarily a great writer. He's a great speaker, but his writings are kind of lackluster in comparison to other spiritual, philosophical, Zen or Taoist writers, and that's why it's B tier. I think it's overall a good book. It has a lot to say. It talks about the origins of Zen Buddhism. Very briefly, if you want to understand Zen Buddhism, it's a combination of Taoism and Buddhism, and its number one mantra is if you see Buddha on the road, kill him. Basically saying that if you try to be like someone else, you miss the point. And I think it's a very interesting philosophical point, but it's not really, I don't know. I just think that other people have done it better, and that's why it's B tier. Archetypes of the collective unconscious, S tier. Jung has a way of writing that is both very analytical and very spiritual. Jung is a master of blowing the lines of the creative mind and the, you know, analytical mind. and I think it really shines through in this work. It's I mean, to understand archetypes is to understand the symbols that rule us, and I think there's so much that goes into it. I really can't unpack it and get to every single work that I am going to talk about. So I will just refer you to the videos, the countless videos I've made about Jungian archetypes. But it's one of those defining works by Jung, and I think if you can understand archetypes, you can understand yourself, you can understand other people as well. Island by Aldous Huxley, A tier. It's essentially Huxley's response to Brave New World. It's essentially Huxley's utopia. It's the last work that he wrote, and I think he really has a lot to say in it. Existentialism is a humanism. We're gonna go C tier. I just think Jean-Paul Sartre, Sater, I don't know how you say it. I don't even really care. He's okay as a philosopher. I don't really think he says anything that Camus says. Well, that Camus doesn't say. I don't think he says anything that Nietzsche doesn't say. He has an interesting idea that you have the ultimate responsibility in everything, and I think that's inspiring. But aside from that, I really don't feel like reading anything else by him. Dubliners by James Joyce, B tier. There's very high moments in this, and there's very mild moments in this. The ending is tremendous, but just reading the rest of James Joyce, it kind of leaves a lot to be desired. Um, if you read Ulysses, it's something unlike anything else that you've ever read. And there's inklings of this, but it's still too much like everything else you've ever read. But overall, really good book, and probably would recommend you read this first by James Joyce. The Interpretations of Dreams, C tier. Obviously, a legacy behind this book. It's obviously one of the most important books when it comes to psychology, and really foundational to a lot of the ideas that we have today. But every time Freud is about to say something interesting, he takes it in the dumbest way possible. I think Freud was too focused on grouping people together instead of understanding the deep philosophical implications of his discoveries. So it always feels like he stops a step short. And overall, it's a necessary book because without Freud, you don't get Jung, but at the same time, it leaves a lot to be desired. Hamlet, we're on A tier. Great book. Definitely one of those books that you need to read. I feel like Hamlet wasn't necessarily required reading in most high schools, but it's probably one of Shakespeare's better plays. It talks about the necessity to be happier, the necessity to have honor. Interesting themes, classic Shakespearean tragedy, and yeah, great book. A New Earth, B tier. Um, I think it's too similar to The Power of Now, which is Eckhart Tolle's first book. It really doesn't say anything that that book doesn't say, but yeah, the world is wills. The world is will and representation. We're going to A tier. Schopenhauer is interesting. He has a lot to say, and if you can kind of parse through the pessimism, there is a lot of wisdom in it. And when you read Schopenhauer from the context of that he was more of a mystic than a philosopher, then it all starts to make sense. But yeah, the seven spiritual laws of success. We're going C tier. Interesting, very introductory book. It's kind of like when you click on a YouTube video, it's like top 10 whatever. That's the kind of vibes I get from this. It's not extremely philosophically deep, but it does talk about interesting ideas. Not gonna go D tier. I don't even know if anything in this is gonna go D tier. I don't necessarily read bad books. I probably wouldn't finish it if it was a bad book, but yeah. Memories, Dreams, Reflections. We're going to A tier for this. Memories, Dreams, Reflections is interesting because essentially it's Jung psychoanalyzing himself and analyzing his experiences in order to become the best doctor he could be. It gives you a direct insight on the greatest psychologist psychoanalyzing himself, and it's part autobiography, part biography. It's a very interesting book. It's definitely, if you're a fan of Jung, definitely a must read. Ulysses, we're gonna go S tier or A tier, not S tier. I would put Ulysses S tier, but I think it's so the reason I'm not putting it S tier is because it's a great book. It's unlike anything else, but it's so difficult to read, and I wouldn't recommend it to everybody because of that difficulty. I think we're gonna reserve S tier for books that are must read, and I'm gonna put Ulysses just a step below that because I think it's just something that's so obscure, so confusing that it might not be everyone's cup of tea. I loved it when I read it, but I like I told myself I was gonna reread it a few times, but like it's just so much work. And the thing, like the amount of work that I would have to put in to read Ulysses, I could read 10, 15 new books, and it's like I'm at this stage where I want to just read new things. I don't want to reread things, so that's why it's A tier. Plato's Apology, S tier, clearly. Plato's Apology is essentially the first recorded fight for free speech, and I think it's one of the most important philosophical works that you could ever read. It's around 20 pages. It's well worth the read. It's about the trial of Socrates, and would you rather live in a world where you can't speak freely, or would you rather die? And Socrates chose to die. Power of Now, A tier, one of the better self-help books I've ever read. Talks about awareness. It talks about being in the present moment. It talks about how most of your problems aren't real and how most of your problems are a figment of your imagination. Think of the Seneca quote: "We suffer more in our own minds than we do in reality." Um, Essentially, I think that sums up the book perfectly well in one sentence. But yeah, Doors of Perception. We're gonna go B tier. Doors of Perception is essentially Aldous Huxley's experience with psychedelics and the interconnectiveness of everything. It's an extremely interesting work because it shows a big shift in Huxley's worldview, and it's definitely something very compelling. And I don't necessarily know how much it offers, and that's why it's B tier. B tier. I love the book, but I don't think it really gives you anything to go into the world with and improve your life. Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man. We're gonna go A tier. I love James Joyce. I think he's a great writer. Um, Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man is really a self-biography about an artist trying to find his art and trying to find his craft and find any sort of success in this world. And essentially the takeaway is, your purpose is your art, finding finding purpose in the creation of what it is that you want to create. Great Gatsby, we're gonna go B tier. Great novel, great work. Um, really summarizes the Roaring Twenties, but I think it stops there. To me, it's just there's so many different books that are so much more interesting philosophically that it's just going to be B tier. I don't think it really talks about humanity in any interesting ways. I don't think it really hits at crazy interesting themes, but it's a classic. It's definitely well worth a read. Catcher in the Rye, similar. I think when I read The Catcher in the Rye when I was much younger, it hit much differently because I was in that kind of stage where I was like unwilling to grow up and unwilling to move on and unwilling to accept change. But um, reading it again, it seemed like a young man who couldn't quite come to grips with his coming to age and didn't have any sorts of rites of passage that distinguished him to be a man, and because of that, he struggled. And essentially, that's what the book's about. Animal Farm. We're gonna go S tier. Um, I think Orwell created something that could be understood by toddlers and old people as well, and both could get the same enjoyment from it. It's a masterful work in terms of the fable because each animal has its own unique characteristics, and these characteristics really go to say something about the character as well. Ethics by Spinoza. We're gonna go B tier. Essentially, ethics is the first secular work of philosophy. It has a lot of influence. It influenced Schopenhauer. It influenced most likely Jung, Nietzsche. Really influenced a lot of the early philosophers, a lot of the 18th century, no, 19th century philosophers, and you know, in turn influenced modern day philosophers. But it's interesting. It's not something that like I think is extremely deep, but it does have one of the best explanations for God in it. And yeah, The Plague by Camus, B tier, great story. Talks about the implications of the world when our institutions don't work anymore. But yeah, The Law and the Promise, S tier. I think Neville just has a way of saying things and a way of explaining things that I haven't found anyone else. To me, Neville is the greatest answer to lack of creativity in this world and lack of getting what you want. And I really urge you reading Neville Goddard. Tao, the Watercourse Way. I'm gonna put C tier. Again, I think all of Alan Watts' books kind of blend together. And that's I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I don't necessarily say don't read them, but I just think they're all kind of the same at a certain point, and I would really just recommend read The Way of Zen. I think that's his best book. The Perennial Philosophy. We're gonna go A tier with this. Perennial Philosophy basically breaks down all religions to common threads and kind of shows how they're the same, but sort of different, and it's just really interesting book. It really is. 1984, obviously S tier. 1984 is one of the greatest dystopian novels of all time, and certain people say we live in a 1984 reality. Certain ways I agree, but I would have to say it's more of a Brave New World, which is down here. We'll get to that, but yeah. And Search for Meaning. I would either say S tier or A tier. We're gonna go A tier here because I think this idea is kind of echoed in other works in more compelling ways. Um, Essentially, man's search for meaning is the idea that when you have meaning, when you have purpose, you have a purpose to live. And absent of that, it's difficult for you to, um, how do I say this? Basically, in absence of purpose, you don't have any reason to go on. And Viktor Frankl was essentially dealing with some of the worst of humanity, and the people that made it through it were the people that had a purpose, that had a meaning, and the people that didn't were the people that just gave up. Acres of Diamond, Acres of Diamonds. We're gonna go C tier. It's a great speech. I would say just pull up the audiobook on YouTube. It's not really worth you buying the book and reading it. It's interesting. The basic idea is that there's untapped potential in everyone that you see around you. It's a great speech, but it's nothing that, Neville Goddard hasn't said. Um, Kind of generic self-help. It's, along the lines of Think and Grow Rich and stuff like that. Faust, I don't know if this is controversial. We're gonna go B tier. I liked Faust. I probably need to reread it. It inspired every great author that I've been inspired by, but I read it and I probably just didn't pay enough attention to the details. I probably just didn't analyze it. I don't know. I just feel like the themes that Faust talked about was talked about better in other books. Walden, S tier, easily. Walden is essentially about the experience of one man and going into the woods to basically simplify his life for the sake of living a better life. And to me, it has one of the most interesting implications on the idea of purpose and the idea of what it means to live. But yeah, definitely recommend reading it. It's one of the best books I've ever read. The Red Book, we're going to put in A tier. I would say if you could understand the Red Book, it would be an S tier, but it's so difficult to parse through. Essentially, it's Jung going into his own unconscious and facing his own demons and, dealing with the things that he had to deal with so that he could become the best doctor that he could be. Becoming Supernatural, we're gonna go B tier. I think it's a great book. I think it has a lot of interesting things to say. Again, I just think Devil Goddard says it better. It goes into the science and the statistics and how we can kind of prove that metaphysics exist, but I don't need those things to believe in anything. So to me, it was kind of just I don't know. I don't think I'm really the target audience of this book. The Intelligent Investor, great book. Warren Buffett's favorite book on investing. Definitely has a lot of interesting things to say. It might be outdated. I have a friend that's very into investing, and he says he would never invest in bonds just because of the interest rates and the way that the stock market has changed. So maybe there's some parts of this that are outdated, but great book. Will teach you a lot about investing and teach you a lot about investing in the smart way, not taking huge risks and consistently making gains. The Abolition of Man is A tier. Essentially, it's C.S. Lewis breaking down what is wrong with postmodernism and what is wrong with the education system, and it's teaching men to have hollow chests. Essentially, you're teaching them to not believe in anything and not stand for anything. And when a man doesn't believe or stand for anything, then they don't really fight for anything. And it's just really about the destruction of values. And it's really one of the most compelling arguments that can be made for traditional values, traditional morality. When would Jesus bring the pork chops? It's a George Carlin book. It's funny. Doesn't really, it has some interesting ideas. It has some interesting um, comments about the world, but it's not something I'll ever come back to. Fun read, but all over the place. If you love George Carlin, it's something that you're gonna like to read. I don't know what this is. What is this? Oh, this is Frankenstein. Frankenstein is S tier. Frankenstein is essentially what we're struggling with today. The idea that is technology really progressing us forward, or is it coming at the expense of things? And if you look at the implications of technology today, I feel like it's much more detrimental than it is beneficial. Think about people that go on social media all day. Think about how people's brains are melting because of social media. Think about families breaking up because of social media and the political beliefs that are pushed upon them by our corporate overlords. And yeah, I just think I think these themes have never gone away, and I think these themes are masterfully written. Essentially, to me, it's Faust, but done in a more modern setting. And actually, I don't know which was written first, Faust or Frankenstein. I think they were probably written around the same time, but I just think it has the themes better nailed down. Thus, books Zarathustra, A tier. Again, Nietzsche at his most inspiring. It's A tier because it's written in allegory. I don't necessarily know if people would enjoy allegory. The Gay Science is written in philosophy writing, so it's not difficult to parse through. Whereas this, you kind of have to parse the meaning from it. Emerson's essays, S tier. I talk about Emerson enough on this channel. I'm not going to go into more detail. My voice is starting to give out, so we're going to try to get through these last things before that happens. But Emerson could teach you anything you want to about yourself. You just need to open up the pages and read them. The Rebel by Camus, A tier. Um, my favorite idea from this book is that every rebellion becomes what it was exactly fighting against in the beginning, and how every rebellion is futile, not futile. Kind of mix those two words up right there. Kafka's short stories, A tier. Um, Kafka is one of the best writers who ever lived, and his stories have a lot to say. Um, they're extremely dark, they're extremely wicked, and they're very twisted. And if you like that sort of thing, you're gonna love Kafka. It's funny, I gave my aunt a Kafka work, and she couldn't read it because it was too brutal. And I was like, "This is one of my favorite books," and she's like, I just couldn't read it." The Greatest Salesman in the World, C tier. Reminded me a lot of the Richest Man in Babylon. It's a good book. It's one of those like philosophical, spiritual kind of books. But again, I just think other books do it better. Very simplistic tale. Has some interesting themes, but in all honesty, I really don't remember it much. So if I don't remember it much, then it didn't leave a lasting impact. America, we're gonna put B tier. This is Kafka's least celebrated novel, and essentially it's I don't know, every time the main character is about to get some sort of good thing happen to him, things unfold in the most hilarious and absurd ways, and it's really funny. It's a really funny novel, and a lot of ridiculous things happen, and kind of sucks that it's not as celebrated as some of Kafka's other works because I think it's better than others in certain kind of ways, and I think it shows a more light side to Kafka. But yeah, Brave New World, we're gonna go S tier for this. I think Brave New World really tells us a lot about the world we live in. It's a world that was subverted, not um. So essentially, I like to compare 1984 and Brave New World this way. Brave New World is the world was controlled by subversion. 1984, the world was controlled by force. So in 1984, essentially, everything's done through the barrel of a gun, where Brave New World, people are kind of tricked and distracted so that they don't see the hardship and the pain and everything else around them. And yeah, I just think it really says a lot about our modern day age. Huxley wrote this in 1933, and he basically predicted the pharmaceutical drugs to make us happy, which is kind of weird. Um, Here we go. The Trial is my favorite work by Kafka. The Trial is essentially about a man who is put on trial. Wow, who could have guessed? And he cannot find out what he did wrong, and he visits a bunch of different people. And essentially, the whole book is about how each person has their own little pull and little influence on the justice system because of their ego. And it talks about ideas of fairness, ideas of justice, and can we ever have justice in a system that's run by people? And the answer in the end is no, but yeah, very, very interesting. This is White Nights by Dostoevsky. We're gonna put this A tier. White Nights is the most Dostoevsky love story ever. I'm not going to spoil it. It's very, very good. It's very, very interesting. It's around, I think, 80 pages, something like that. Really recommend reading it. I'm not going to say any more because I don't want to spoil it. Federalist Papers, B tier. Federalist Papers are something that I wish politicians read because then they would understand what our country is founded upon. But again, it doesn't benefit their corporate sponsors. So, again, but the Federalist Papers are extremely interesting because if you're interested in philosophy and interested in political philosophy, definitely need to read it. And if you're interested in the Constitution, it will illustrate a lot of the influence to that. Um, Interesting enough, a lot of these people read Cicero. So if you read Cicero, you know exactly what they're talking about. The Castle, B tier. The Castle is Kafka's most mature work. That's what people say. I didn't really like it. Um, I thought it wasn't as subversive and politically corrupt as The Trial, and it wasn't as funny as America, and it really was a mix of the two, but didn't do any of them as well as either one did. Screw Tape Letters, B tier. I think it's interesting. Essentially, it's about the devil. Is it the devil? I can't remember if it's the devil or one of the devil's main helpers trying to corrupt a man, and essentially it's C.S. Lewis's kind of attempt to say like if you are a good Christian and how to be a good Christian and how to avoid the influence of the devil. Good work. Don't really remember it that much. A few things I took away from it, but again, I think it's a interesting concept, but I feel like other books do the same thing better. Alan Watts, The Wisdom of Insecurity. Again, a lot of Alan Watts books kind of blend together. No Country for Old Men, something I just finished yesterday. We're gonna go A tier. Not as good as Blood Meridian. I think it has a lot of the same themes as Blood Meridian, so I'm not gonna put it in S tier. Um, Great book. It's really, really, really compelling. Has great action. Really morally bleak, and everything you could ask for in a Cormac McCarthy novel is there. Man in the Symbols. We're gonna go S tier. I don't really want to put two works by Young in S tier, but I have to. Man in the Symbols is the most simplistic explanation of Jung's ideas, and essentially it was Jung's ideas meant to be spread to a wide audience, and really has a lot of good things in there. This is The Metamorphosis by Kafka, S tier. One of Kafka's best works, really defines his style. Really, the if you're gonna read one thing by Kafka, read The Metamorphosis. I think it's like 100 pages, somewhere around there. It's about basically, do people love us for who we are, what we do for them? Basically, a traveling salesman one day wakes up as a human beetle hybrid, and his family has to adapt to it and kind of try to accept him, but unfortunately not. Social Justice Fallacies, Thomas Sowell. Interesting work. Doesn't really give us a solution, doesn't really give us anything to go off of. Kind of breaks some of the narratives that we see in the modern day world that are kind of being revealed now. Anytime you read Thomas Sowell, anytime you listen to his interviews, he is very interesting. I don't know. I just think Thomas Sowell The thing about Thomas Sowell is like it's he's not idealistic, but he is in the same way because he's always like, well, if you just did this, then everything would be perfect. And I just don't necessarily buy that. Um, but again, he's a very interesting mind when it comes to economics, when it comes to what policies are being enacted, and he is truly a gem. And if you've never heard of Thomas Sowell, I definitely urge you to go study him because he is very interesting, and he's like 94 and he's still very sharp. It's awesome to see. Fight Club, um, we're gonna go B tier. I think Fight Club doesn't do anything that other works haven't done. Maybe it's a more modern adaptation of Nietzsche's worries about society, of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, of, you know, existentialist themes and the descent into nihilism. I think the movie is one of the best movies ever made, but the book it just has too much competition to be in the upper echelon of books. But it really does have something interesting to say. I think the book's better than the movie. But yeah, great work. Worth reading if you like the movie. If you haven't watched the movie, read the book first. But yeah, very interesting themes. Um, very interesting implications on the modern day world and the role of a man in the modern day world. But yeah, Become What You Are. I think this is now another Alan Watts book. Again, they all blend together. The Tao Te Ching, S tier. Um, One of the best books I've ever read. It's around 40 pages. Paradoxes that will be debated until the end of time, and I think there is a lot to be learned in Taoist philosophy. Notes from the Underground. We're gonna go A tier. It's borderline S tier. The only reason I don't say it is because I don't know. I just there's something about me that doesn't want to put it S tier, but essentially it's one of Dostoevsky's most comprehensive works. It's around, I think, 120 pages, something like that. And essentially it's a man who he's known as the underground man, and he kind of tries to bring down everyone else around him. And yeah, it's hilarious in parts, it's ridiculous in others, and well worth the read. The Stranger, uh, we're going to get A tier. It's one of those borderline S tiers as well. It's about, you know, what society does and how it's essentially a man that doesn't believe in anything being judged by society. And yeah, it's very compelling, very short, well worth the read. If you like Camus, tremendous as well. If you haven't read anything by Camus, great place to start. Power of Positive Thinking, B tier, great book, but again, I think Neville does it better. Lead the Field, B tier again. Um, I wouldn't say generic self-help. I think it's better than most self-help books, but most self-help books could really just not be read and you just read something in this section or this section. Essentially all self-help books kind of just are dumbing down philosophy and dumbing down religious ideals and kind of focusing it into the success realm of things. But yeah, great book. I think it has a lot to say. Fit for Life 2, I think I did this on the last one. We're gonna go B tier. It has some interesting information about health. I don't necessarily agree with everything it says, but the fruit till noon thing is something that I do till this day, and it's really helped me. But yeah, with that said, here is the tier list of, it says 87. I thought it said 80 at the beginning, but 87 books. I'm losing my voice, so I'm gonna end it now. Um, but yeah, I will link part one if you want to watch that one as well. But yeah, hopefully you guys like this video. Hopefully I read more books so that we can do another one of this in the future. Maybe I do it at like 40 books so we can go into more detail about each and every book. That might be a smarter idea, but yeah, here is part two of the tier list. And yeah, love you guys so much. Thank you guys so much. Peace out. I'll catch you in the next one.